I don't care what your ticket says, you are not getting on this flight.
I understand you're upset, but perhaps we can find a solution.
The airport was humming with the usual energy of early morning departures. Wheelie bags rolled over polished tile floors. Boarding calls echoed faintly, and the smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. In the first-class check-in line, everything looked as expected: sharp suits, sleek sunglasses, and people who expected to be there. That's why heads turned when she stepped forward. A woman in a navy blue coat and a cream-colored scarf. Not flashy, not loud, just calm, collected, poised. She dragged a simple, slightly scuffed Samsonite suitcase behind her and wore no visible designer labels, just clean lines, sensible shoes, and a presence that didn't beg for attention. But attention found her anyway. The airline agent glanced up, scanning her slowly, eyes narrowing for a moment too long. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, forcing a smile. "Are you in the right line? This is first class." The woman didn't miss a beat. "Yes," she replied, pulling up her boarding pass on her phone. "Flight 384, first class." The agent hesitated. Something in her expression shifted, something tight around the mouth, something judging. She took the phone, stared at it for a second too long, then looked the woman over again. "Let me just verify something," she mumbled before stepping away from the kiosk. Behind them, a man chuckled under his breath. "Too hood to fly first class anyway," he said to no one in particular. The woman heard it. She said nothing. Another passenger in line started recording. A teenage girl whispered to her mom, "Why are they treating her like that?" Still, the woman didn't flinch. She just stood there, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, posture perfectly still, the cream scarf falling softly across her shoulder. No outburst, no reaction, no sign of frustration. But inside, everything was awake. Her name was Immani Brooks, 34 years old, federal civil rights attorney with top-level clearance. Her work had reshaped policy for agencies that funded airport security across the country. And the people behind that check-in desk, they had no idea who they were stalling. Not yet, because Immani wasn't the type to waive credentials when insulted. She didn't need to raise her voice to be dangerous. All she needed was to let them keep talking. They were writing the lawsuit for her word by word. And in less than 2 hours, when her name hit the inboxes of legal teams and regional supervisors, when the footage hit TikTok and the hashtags started burning through Twitter, the same people calling her too hood were going to find out exactly how expensive that assumption could be. Immani Brooks wasn't new to being underestimated. She had lived her whole life being read the wrong way by people who thought they could size her up in one glance. They saw a black woman in a hoodie or head wrap and thought loud, unqualified, out of place. But she'd learned long ago that dignity wasn't about looking like you belonged. It was about knowing you did. She had grown up in Southside Chicago, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father who coached youth basketball at the local rec center. Her neighborhood had been loud, alive, and yes, rough around the edges, but it also taught her grit, focus, and the quiet strength of never backing down when you're right. At 34, Immani was now a federal attorney assigned to civil rights litigation. She had graduated near the top of her class from Yale Law, clerked for a federal judge, and now worked directly on cases involving racial bias and discrimination in transportation and public service. It wasn't a glamorous job. No press conferences, no Twitter followers, just stacks of depositions, thousands of emails, and courtrooms where she stood alone, calm and razor sharp, dismantling systemic injustice piece by piece. The case she was working on now involved a growing number of complaints against a major airline patterned incidents of profiling at check-in, over-policing black and brown passengers, and selectively denying first-class privileges based on appearance. This wasn't the first time she'd seen it, but it was the first time she was experiencing it in real time. She was flying to D.C. to meet with a panel of federal transportation officials. The meeting had been set for months. Her ticket was purchased by her office. Her seat in first class was booked for a reasoned time to review confidential files in peace, not squeezed into economy next to someone scrolling TikTok at full volume. And yet, the airline staff had managed to reduce her to a security flag because of her coat, her skin, and her silence. She could have dropped her credentials right there, could have ended it. But Immani didn't work like that. She didn't ask for permission to be treated fairly. She watched, listened, and let people reveal themselves. And the more they talked, the more they gave her exactly what she needed. Every extra comment, every delay, every microaggression, they were all building blocks for something bigger, something legal, something undeniable. Because when you make someone like Immani Brooks stand aside for daring to look comfortable in her own skin, you're not just picking a fight with the wrong person, you're putting your company on the wrong side of history. And she had come prepared. The woman behind the counter returned with another attendant, this one slightly older, with a clipboard in hand and that tight corporate smile that always meant trouble. "Ma'am," she said, not looking up from the screen, "we're having trouble verifying your ticket. We're going to need you to step aside for a moment while we sort this out." Immani simply nodded and stepped back. Her suitcase remained upright at her side, her scarf still resting neatly across her shoulder. But inside, her pulse was steady low and focused, like a chess player watching an opponent make another reckless move. As she stood to the side, the line moved forward around her. 2 white business travelers were checked in quickly, no questions asked. A woman in yoga pants and a messy bun breezed through the counter without even showing ID. Immani watched it all, every moment, every detail, each one silently noted and stored. She wasn't looking for a fight. She was gathering evidence. Then came the shift. A third staff member whispered something into a radio. Minutes later, 2 uniformed airport security officers arrived. One stood in front of Immani, the other to her left. "We've received a report that you were being non-compliant with check-in staff," the first one said, his hand casually resting near his holster. "We'd like you to come with us to answer a few questions." Immani raised one eyebrow, but kept her voice even. "Did I raise my voice? Did I threaten anyone? Or are we escalating this? Because I didn't smile enough." While handing over a valid first-class ticket, the officer didn't answer. Passengers nearby slowed down, watching. Someone else began recording. The moment was taking shape not as an isolated inconvenience, but as a public display of power misused. Immani had seen this pattern in dozens of cases, and now she was living it. They didn't touch her, but they made it clear she was no longer welcome in the line she had paid for. She was ushered aside into a corner by the wall, away from other travelers. The same airline employee who first questioned her now stood behind the counter, chatting and laughing with another passenger as if nothing unusual had happened. Immani's eyes didn't leave them. She didn't move. She didn't need to, because what they didn't realize was that this wasn't just her job. It was her specialty. And they were walking straight into her case file. A few minutes passed, but it felt longer. Immani remained where they placed her next to a column near the edge of the terminal, far enough from the first-class line to be out of sight, but not out of view. People were watching. Some whispered, some filmed, and still, not a single staff member returned to explain anything. Eventually, a new face appeared, a supervisor in a blazer with a lanyard that said, "Operations Lead." She didn't greet Immani. She didn't apologize. She just walked up, holding a printout in one hand and a customer report in the other. "Miss Brooks," she said. Her voice clipped. "It seems there was confusion regarding your boarding class. Your appearance and booking raised a flag in our system." Immani didn't move. "My appearance?" she asked calmly. "And what exactly about my appearance flagged anything?" The supervisor paused, clearly not expecting a direct question. "It's procedural. We've had cases of individuals using tickets that don't match their ID, or fraudulently accessed priority lines." Immani's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "So let me be clear. I showed you my boarding pass. I showed my government-issued ID. You verified the name. But instead of checking me in like every other passenger, you escalated to airport security based solely on how I looked." Silence. Passengers nearby had now stopped pretending not to listen. The air felt tense like a string pulled too tight. Then came the part that truly set the tone. The supervisor glanced around and lowered her voice. "If you had just cooperated in a more respectful manner, this could have been avoided." Immani let out a quiet breath. "So now it's my tone. Not my ID, not my ticket. Just the fact that I didn't smile through being disrespected." The supervisor blinked. Immani stepped forward just slightly. Not aggressively, just enough to reclaim her space. "You're not the first to confuse quiet with guilty, and I won't be the last person you'll underestimate. But I do suggest you look up the name on that boarding pass again. Carefully, and just like that, the moment shifted. The supervisor stepped back, uncertain. Immani didn't threaten, didn't raise her voice, but the weight of her words hung in the air like thunder that hadn't yet cracked. Because behind that blue coat and cream scarf was more than just a passenger. There was authority, there was history, and there was a reckoning coming, whether they were ready for it or not. The supervisor hesitated, eyes flicking down to the name on the printed manifest in her hand. Something changed in her posture, barely noticeable to anyone else. But Immani caught it, a subtle tightening of the jaw, a flash of recognition. But instead of owning up or correcting the situation, the woman forced a thin smile and said, "We'll get you rechecked in shortly. Thank you for your patience. No apology, no accountability. Just a weak attempt to smooth over what couldn't be unsaid." Immani remained still, her arms loosely crossed, the edge of her cream scarf catching a slight breeze from the vent above. She wasn't angry in the way they expected. No raised voice, no demands, just silence that burned hotter than anything loud ever could. Another staffer appeared, this one younger, possibly new. He looked visibly uncomfortable as he approached. "Ma'am, if you'll follow me, we'll walk you to a private check-in desk to finalize everything." He didn't meet her eyes. He just wanted to make the moment go away. As she walked past the passengers who had been watching, Immani felt their eyes follow her. Some looked embarrassed, some curious, a few quietly supportive. But no one said a word. They reached a smaller desk at the far end of the terminal, nearly empty. The young staffer tapped quickly on a keyboard, avoiding small talk. Within minutes, her first-class boarding pass printed out, crisp and clean, like nothing had ever happened. "You're all set," he said, sliding it across the counter. Immani took it, held his gaze for just a second, and nodded once. Then, before leaving, she spoke clearly and calmly. "I'm not looking for an apology from you, but you should know I do remember faces, and I document everything." She turned and walked away. The moment hadn't ended, it had simply shifted. Because what the staff still didn't realize was that the woman they tried to sideline was the lead federal attorney on a pending civil rights case against their airline. They had just handed her something more powerful than outrage. They gave her proof. 3 days later, the video hit 2 million views. The moment Immani was questioned at check-in, the moment security was called, the moment she stood in silence while being surrounded. It had all been captured and posted by a teenage girl waiting in line with her mom. The caption read, "She just stood there, calm, dignified, and they treated her like a criminal." It spread fast. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Too Hood to Fly started trending, followed by Immani Brooks, and eventually, First Class Justice. People weren't just reacting, they were outraged. Comment sections exploded with personal stories from other Black women, professionals, veterans, even flight attendants who had experienced the exact same treatment. And suddenly, this wasn't just Immani's story, it was everyone's. But still, Immani didn't say a word online. Not until a week later, when she posted a quiet, 500-word message on LinkedIn. No video, no hashtags, just a profile picture of her in that same navy coat and cream scarf. The post read, in part, "Being dressed comfortably isn't unprofessional. Being silent isn't suspicious. And being Black should never be treated like a threat. I wasn't humiliated by that experience. I was reminded why I do this work. Because dignity isn't something you earn with a boarding pass. It's something you deserve simply by existing." Within hours, that post was shared by civil rights attorneys, professors, airline employees, and even a few quietly embarrassed executives. Comments flooded in thank yous, apologies, and offers to speak at conferences and panels. She declined most of them, because the real message wasn't about going viral. It was about accountability, about memory, and about reminding every company that hides bias behind policy that sometimes the person you profile is the one writing the rules. As for the airline, they issued a generic apology after pressure from press outlets, but Immani never responded. She didn't need to. A formal complaint had already been filed through the Department of Transportation, and her name wasn't just on the boarding pass anymore. It was on the cover page of a federal investigation. Immani flew again 2 weeks later. Same airline, same route. This time, no one questioned her. No one asked her to stand aside. She sat in her first-class seat, opened her laptop, and returned to her work. Not because she had something to prove, but because she always belonged there, and now the world knew it.